in this section we are going to look at the equations of horizontal and vertical lines. And equations of horizontal and vertical lines are really pretty straightforward and a lot easier in many ways than the slanted lines that we have already looked at. But they're something that students usually have a lot of trouble with because they get a little mixed up with the rules, and I think they don't really understand where the equations come from. So let's see if we can fix that here. So we already know about the slopes of horizontal and vertical lines. We know the slope of a horizontal line is 0 because a slope tells us about the steepness of the graph, and you can see a horizontal line has no steepness at all. A vertical line, on the other hand, is as steep as you possibly could be, and we call that undefined. So the horizontal line is going to have an equation that is y equals some number. And so that might look like this, y equals 4 or y equals -2. Those are equations of horizontal lines. Let's look at why that is the case. Let's look at this horizontal line that I have graphed here, and I'm just going to pick out a few points on the line here. I'm just sort of randomly selecting a few points on the line. And let's look at the coordinates of all of those points. So right here I have the point -9, -3. And then here I have the point -2, -3. And the coordinates of this point right here are +2, -3. And the coordinates of this point right here are 7, -3. Now, I could have picked any other points on this line, and the same thing would begin to occur here. If you look, your y-coordinate for all of these is always -3. So the equation of this particular line that's graphed here would be y equals -3. You can also see here it crosses the y-axis at -3. Y equals -3 would be the equation of this line. So it's sometimes confusing to students, I think, because the x-axis is horizontal, but the equation of a horizontal line is y equals. So it's sort of backwards from your axes here. Let's look over here at this vertical line. If we look at all the points on this vertical line, so I'm going to pick some randomly here, and if we look at the coordinates of those points, the coordinates of this point right here, this top point, is -2, 9. And right here we have -2, 3. Right here, -2, 0. And right here, -2, -9. And so you can see the same thing happening here where we've got that x-coordinate is the same over and over and over again. So, in a vertical line, your equation is x equals some number there. So, this particular line was x equals -2. Other examples of vertical lines would be things like x equals 7 and x equals 10 and x equals -1,423. Those are all vertical lines there. So let's do a few problems with these. So if we're writing the equation of a line, we are going to look at the graph, and since this is a horizontal line, this is going to be a y equals line. And then we're just going to look at that y-axis. Remember, this is your x-axis, this is your y-axis. We're going to see where it hits. It's right here at y equals 4. And all the coordinates on this line have a y-coordinate of 4. So this is our equation. For the next problem, I have a vertical line. And anytime I have a vertical line, I know the equation is going to be x equals a number. So I'm going to look. I know I've got x and y-axis. I'm going to look at the x-axis. I'm going to see where this graph crosses that x-axis. And it's right here at -3. So x has to equal -3. For the equation of this line. Let's look at a couple more. For number 3, we've got a horizontal line. Horizontal lines are going to be y equals a number. And in this case, here's your y-axis right here, and we're crossing that y-axis right there at 2. So this equation is y equals 2. And then for our example 4 here, I see that I have a vertical line. A vertical line is always x equals a number. So x in this case, you see you're crossing your x-axis, x is going to equal 5. Okay? Let's look at doing some of these just from word problems. So for example 5, it says write the equation of the line that has a slope of 0 and passes through 4, 3. And so slope of 0 tells me that we are dealing with a horizontal line here. So this is going to be a horizontal line. And so remember that horizontal lines are y equals a number. And in this case, we are looking over here at this point, and we're looking at the y coordinate. Because for this graph to go through the point 4, 3, the y coordinate must be 3. So y equals 3 in this case. So if you're writing the equation of a horizontal line, you're going to look at the point that your equation is going through, and you're going to give the y coordinate. For example 6, we have an equation of the line that has an undefined slope. An undefined slope tells us that we're dealing with a vertical line here. And this vertical line passes through the point 6, negative 2. So when we were dealing with a vertical line, it's always x equals a number. We're looking at our point over here, and the x coordinate here is 6. So the equation of this line is going to be x equals 6. Let's continue on. Example 7 says, is x equals 0 a vertical or horizontal line? X equals 0, we know that x equals, this is always going to be vertical. It's opposite from the axes. The x-axis is horizontal. But x equals 0, that's going to be vertical. The y-axis is vertical. But if I have an equation of y equals 5, then that would be a horizontal line. So this equation here, x equals, is going to be a vertical line. The next question that we have here asks us to find the equation of the x-axis. So immediately you want to say x equals 0. However, let's think about what we're dealing with here. So we've got our coordinate plane, here's our x-axis, here's our y-axis, and we want to know the equation of that x-axis. Well, the x-axis is horizontal, and horizontal lines have to have a y equals equation. If you think about the points on this line, let's say we've got the point right here, that is 1, 0. The point right here, that is negative 2, 0. Over here, we would have 4, 0. All of those y coordinates are 0. So the equation of the x-axis is actually y equals 0. It seems a little bit backwards, but when you think about graphing those points, it makes sense why that has to be the case. For example 9, it asks us to write the equation of the line that passes through negative 2, 4 and negative 2, 7. So we've done a lot of these problems with our slanted lines that we've looked at so far. And you can start off this problem the same way as we would do those problems, and that would be to find the slope. So you would say 7 minus 4 over negative 2 minus negative 2. And of course, where we have this minus a negative here, both of those will become positive. And this is going to give us 3 over 0, which is undefined. Now, a lot of students want to stop and say that's the answer, but it did not ask us for the slope. The question asked us to write the equation of the line. And so we've got to write the equation of this line with an undefined slope. Well, we can't plug it into y equals mx plus b because 3 over 0 is undefined. It's not a number. We can't write the word undefined in the middle of an equation. But the way that we can look at this is really simple. If we have undefined slope, that means vertical line, which means that we have x equals a number. And if you look at your coordinates here, your x coordinates are equal to each other. So your x coordinates are equal to each other. They're both -2, so the equation of this line has to be x equals -2. For example 10, I want to show you how you can tell the equation of this particular line immediately without doing any work at all. And then we'll go back and look at what if I didn't notice that. So if I see this, I've got -2, 8, and 7, 8. I see right here that this 8 is repeated. And both of my y coordinates are 8. So if I notice that this is the case, I can just go ahead and put y equals 8 as my answer. So these can be really quick to do. For example, 9, you could have just seen that that -2 was repeated. It's both of your x coordinates were -2, and you could have immediately just said x equals -2 is your equation of the line. So that's the quickest way to do the problem, but sometimes that doesn't jump out at us. So if that's the case, then you can find slope. You can do 8 minus 8 over 7 minus -2. Right here, of course, with this double negative, that's going to become a plus. So we'll get 0 over 9. And that, of course, equals 0. Now, you actually can do y equals mx plus b here if you forget what to do next. Again, quickest thing to do, 0 slope tells us horizontal, which tells us that y equals a number, which in this case is 8. But you could actually use y equals mx plus b here if you want, because you could plug in one of these points. You could have 8 equals 0 times 7 plus b, and so you'd get 8 equals 0 plus b, which would just be b. And so your y-intercept is b, so you would have the equation y equals 0x plus 8. But of course, if you multiply 0 times x, you just get 0. So this is really just y equals 8. This is the longest way to do the problem, but you can do that if you don't notice that it is a horizontal line in the beginning. Now, I do want you to be careful. I've thrown this question right here in because remember that not all lines that you're going to get are going to be horizontal or vertical. So right here, if we look at our points, we've got 2 and -2. Those are not equal to each other. And right here, we've got 5 and -5. Those are not equal to each other. So what we're going to have to do is what we've done for all of the other problems. This is neither vertical nor horizontal. So we have to find the slope. So when we find our slope, we would do -5 minus 5 over -2 minus 2, and that is going to give us -10 over -4, which will give us a positive 5 halves if we reduce that. So next we would need to do y equals mx plus b, and we've got to plug in one of these points and our slope. I'm going to choose 2, 5 just to avoid the negatives. So the y coordinate would be 5. We know the slope is 5 halves. Our x coordinate is 2, and we've got plus b here. We do have a fraction, but it's not too bad because whenever you do 5 halves times 2, that's like 2 over 1. And these 2's right here can cancel, and you just get 5 over 1, which of course is 5 right here. Or if you need to, you can do it this way. 5 over 2 times 2 over 1 is 10 divided by 2, which is 5. there. So we've got 5 equals 5 plus b, and we could subtract 5 from both sides, so 0 equals b. So our y-intercept here is 0. This is our y-intercept. Our slope was 5/2. So we're going to say y equals 5/2 x plus 0. This makes you look like you don't know what you're talking about because that plus 0 right there doesn't add anything to the problem. So you would probably want to write it like this: y equals 5/2 x, and that would be your answer. So watch out for those. They could be thrown in there where it's not actually vertical or horizontal. All right, just a few last problems here. If we want to graph y equals 7, we've got a y equals just a single number. This is going to be horizontal. So the y-axis right here, on the y-axis, we're going to cross the y-axis at 7. So we're going to have this horizontal line here. Be really careful with example 13. It is not the same as example 12 because you have an x right here, which means 2 is your slope. Okay, so this is neither vertical nor horizontal. Now you don't have a y-intercept for this problem, so that means that there's a plus 0 over here. So that is your y-intercept. So you've got a y-intercept at 0 and a slope of 2. So you'll go up 2 to the right 1, up 2 to the right 1. A lot of students will graph this as a horizontal line because they are not sure what to do with that x there. They don't recognize that it's different than y equals just 2. Example 14 is our last example. We have x equals a number, and that is telling us that we're going to have a vertical line. So on the x-axis here, I'm going to go to where x equals -6, which is right here, and I'm going to draw myself a vertical line. So you've got a couple sections of IXL to do with this. Practice these, and let me know if you have any questions.